Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Calling to order Clark County Council and Council Time, Wednesday, February 18th. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the minutes, I think. Am I on the minutes? I need an agenda. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. How did that happen? February 25th, 2026. Let's start with the roll call.
Counselor Young,
Here.
Counselor Belcott,
Present.
Counselor Fuentes,
Here.
Counselor Little,
Here.
Chair Marshall.
Here. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
None today.
Thank you. Okay, open for public comment on agenda items only on our council time agenda. And just a reminder, limit your comments to 3 minutes and please keep your comments civil. Thank you.
Bruce Barnes,
Good afternoon, Chair and Council. My name is Bruce Barnes for the record. I want to talk a little bit about your unity resolution on 5.1 and the letter of support for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The State of the Union, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, but the president made a comment last night that are you for American and the protection of America, or are you for illegal immigration, right? And it kind of struck a chord with me because in that unity letter and in this letter of support for this foundation, we keep talking about equity and inclusion and this and that and the other thing. And then I read articles in the newspaper about, a person that's been arrested for immigrating 500 illegals up in Yakima County. And there's something wrong with the system, right? There's something wrong with the system when I can't travel outside of this country without a passport and everybody else can flood in here. There's something wrong with the system when we're more concerned with the immigrants that are coming into our country than the homeless that are all over the streets, right? And their health. And we've got some serious problems to face here and some tough decisions. You know what I mean? And I know your jobs are tough. My dad has sat in those very places. He's been my business manager of our electrical workers union. I've sat on the executive board. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life. And to me, right is right and wrong is wrong, right? And I've lived in this community my entire life and I've never felt scared to be in here, right? But I also been to South Africa where I was one of only 2 people in Soweto where the apartheid took place and everybody else was African, right? Right. So I understand the feeling of what people feel, in a predominantly white community. Right. But what is equity and inclusion? Right. Do we just keep putting people that aren't qualified in jobs because of the color of their skin or their sexual preference or whatever else? I don't think that's fair either. Right. Because being in the electrical trade, you work your way up. Right. There's nothing more irritating to a worker to have somebody that doesn't do the amount of work that you do, right? And they're getting paid the same wage, or they've been promoted based on the color of their skin or their sexual preference or whatever. It's to me, it's not right. And we need to look at different ways to do things, right? And I get job opportunity. Our union hall does it. I mean, we have a minority caucus that I sat on. We have a pre-apprenticeship program for everybody but white males. Anybody but white straight males can apply for that program and jump past everybody else, in our apprenticeship. And I'm fine with, that, but we got to do something different. And I appreciate your time.
Bradley Branham,
Hello, I hope everybody's well. I'm here to speak about the Unity Proclamation. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm here to speak about the Unity Proclamation. First, I want to congratulate or thank you, Chair Marshall, for maintaining order during the discussion about the statement that was made earlier. But anyway, to get into what about the equity inclusion, what the words that worry me the most in there when you're talking about inappropriate behavior and decorum, right? And I'm hoping that you don't conflict with that sacred right of free speech. And if you think about free speech, the history in this country, maybe we'll start with the 1688 proclamation, or the Germantown Proclamation by the Quakers, where they implied heavily that slavery was immoral and because of the Golden Rule, right? And then you had Joseph Smith in his what was it called? King Follett proclamation that he said, I have the right to be a prophet, a paraphrase, I have a right to be a prophet, I have a right to be a false prophet, and you have a right to prove that I'm a false prophet. In essence, the religion, the morality, and the freedom of speech, which is interwoven in the First Amendment. Okay, so I want to get to some examples from, I've rewatched all the council meetings from the discussion, and I'm going to get to some examples. The woman with the black shirt that had the anti-fascist logo on the back, she was stopped by security when she came in. She was really agitated because she'd been stopped by the sheriff because she was following law enforcement, who I think showed good judgment by not arresting her, because obviously she didn't know that it is a felony in the state of Washington to follow law enforcement. But they came in, they told her she couldn't wear that shirt. So she went to the, oh man, I'm running out of time. Anyways, the toilet paper incident, I'll get to that because I'm running out of time here. But the toilet paper incident, that's important because the youth are maligned a lot in our culture, especially youthful activists. And that person she did the thing with the toilet paper, which is speech because it was directed toward the council, to that sacred right that we have to speak freely to the council. That was performative speech, just like the guy who turned around and was talking about mental health to the community from Fourth Plane that were sitting behind him. But when he turned around, his speech was to you. I mean, that was performative. So I think those are important things to remember when you worry about decorum and inappropriate behavior. And I know it needs to be balanced. And I think, Chair Marshall, you did a really good job in maintaining order. And from what I've seen, it's not the Portland City Council or the Longview blue shirts in the anti-coal protest that happened up there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Kep, did you wish to speak? Okay.
Hi, Julie Kep, District 2. Hello. First, I'd like to speak to the unity resolution. First, I want to thank the council for putting out this resolution, and I want to thank the council and the staff who put this together. I don't know where Jordan is. I applaud the resolution. I want civility, fairness, safety, diversity, dignity, and RESP, ECT, not just for myself when I attend these meetings, but for everyone who attends these meetings, including the counselors and the staff who work so hard to keep the county running. In the year or so I've been attending council meetings, online or in person, sometimes I just watch the recordings, I've noticed a diminishing civility by people sometimes who speak at the meetings. There's been name calling directed at the counselors or other people who are in attendance or might be speaking. In my opinion, the poor decorum and incivility exhibited here on occasion is at least partly due to what's going on nationally. The current federal government, and I'm talking legislative branch and executive branch, both, have through their rhetoric, policies, and tactics elevated people's reactivity. Just look at last night's State of the Union and you'll see what I mean. The emotions of Clark County's residents seem to be running higher because of the chaos and policies created 2,800 miles away, but that's dragged into our homes daily through whatever media we attend to. So I feel like at least locally, we need to do better. We need to speak civilly, offer grace, sit quietly, and accept differences. Basically, all the good stuff you put in the resolution. And lastly, to quote Aaron Burr's character in the play Hamilton, we need to talk less, smile more. And I might add, listen with an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who didn't sign up here who would like to speak? Okay, we do have one person online. Caller, you've been sent a request to unmute yourself. Please do so, state your name, and go ahead with your comments.
Good afternoon, Kimberly Goheen Elbin. I'm a little bit under the weather, but still going to perform my duty, protect America from foreign and domestic enemies. Seems like our domestic enemies are supporting our foreign enemies, and I resent that. Speaking to this unity resolution, which I consider a misnomer, as it actually promotes division between law-abiding, tax-paying, legal voters and those who are here illegally and being harbored by using hard-earned tax dollars, and a ruling government that our forefathers warned us would happen if we don't hold you accountable. I wrote a email that I had to put on record, and it was not put on record, but part of that email pertained to this unity resolution, and it said, I'm asking that the words constitutional rights in the unity resolution agenda 5.1 be capitalized. Our constitutional rights is our foundation document, and but you did find time to capitalize the Clark County Board of Health. So I asked that the constitutional rights be capitalized. Also, under the principles of pluralism, rule of law versus pluralism. You can argue that pluralism is a principle for a society of citizens and legal residents who have agreed to follow a shared set of laws. In this view, illegal immigration is not an expression of pluralism, but a violation of social contract. Rewarding those who bypass legal channels undermines the very legal system that protects pluralism for anyone else. So we want immigration, but we want it done legally. National sovereignty, a core argument is that a sovereign nation has the fundamental right and duty to its citizens to control its borders and determine who enters its territories. You can argue that pluralism does not mean a boundarless society, and that state must prioritize the good, common good, and security of its current members over the desire of non-citizens. So all of this is true, and I want to state that the pluralism is a true statement, of course, but these when you put whereas the county acknowledges that there are members of our community who experience fear and concern for their personal safety, well, that was those of us that are law-abiding citizens. These are the reasons the unity resolution came about, and it was those who spoke in fear who were increasingly divisive, had divisive rhetoric.
Thank you. Your time is up. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to old business 4.1, minutes of February 18th, 2026. Are there any corrections? No corrections. I'll entertain a motion then.
So moved.
It's been moved. Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to new business 5.1, draft unity resolution. Jordan, are you going to speak to this? Is Counselor Young online? Okay, good. I didn't see his little picture, so great. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. For the record, Jordan Bogie, Senior Policy Analyst. I'll just kind of tee off this conversation. I know this was kind of led by you, Chair, and Counselor Young, so I'll let you speak to that after I introduce the topic here. So this comes out of some discussions that Council had after the Charlie Kirk resolution that was done this fall, and there had been some interest among councilors in doing another resolution that really was focused on unity, taking a broader perspective at some of the issues that have been going on in the county that councilors have been hearing from folks and wanting to make a statement generally, talking about the fact that the council is concerned about, divisive rhetoric, political violence, affirming that that is not something that the council supports. The resolution goes on to talk about, who Clark County serves, and the fact that Clark County is a diverse place. We have residents with all kinds of backgrounds, beliefs, and political viewpoints, and acknowledging that disparities do exist in some areas, and I know that council is actively working on policies to try to reduce those disparities. Some of the commenters had mentioned, there's some talk about the values of the United States and founded on, some of these different principles, and the county wanting to live up to those principles, celebrating the diversity of our residents across the spectrum, and then resolving finally that the council condemns political violence, threats, and intimidation. The county council commits to reviewing the county's code of conduct for council members and for our boards and commissions in order to prioritize dignity and respect for all the members of the council and our boards and commissions, and also making efforts to make sure that the boards and commissions reflect the whole community, as well as affirming the commitment to all of our constitutional rights, and looking at policies that allow for decorum and productive participation in public meetings. I know council has already talked a little bit about this during some of the rules of procedure conversations. And then finally, just calling upon residents and all of our organizations and officials to be respectful, courteous, and to make a shared commitment to the safety and dignity of everyone who lives in the community. And so I know, Chair, you've been working on this. I know, Councilor Young, you've worked on a few drafts of this, so I turn it over to you for any thoughts, but present this to Council for your consideration for any edits, conversation, or potential adoption.
Thank you, Jordan. That's a very good summary. Councilor Young, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just say that it's timely coming in this meeting today because we have had some really divisive conversations with the community in our hearing room. And I really feel that we've all got to work past our differences and realize we're all humans, we're all people, and we all have different views and perspectives, and that is okay. And what's not okay is to think that your perspective only is the only proper perspective, and that specifically that violence would ensue because of this. It's just pure insanity, in my opinion. So I appreciate the council taking a look at this, very supportive of it. And I hope the community will take a look as well, and that everybody will kind of reflect on their thoughts and their beliefs, and just recognize the different perspectives that people have, and again, be okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from councilors? Yes, go ahead, Councilor Belcott.
I was just wondering where the second bullet came from, and what does that mean or entail?
Related to Clark County as an employer of 17.
No, the council, the second bullet, the council commits.
Oh, second
to
page.
reviewing. Yeah, it's up on the screen. I think Michelle and Rebecca have it up there.
I think I am interested in that one. I know there's been some concerns about some comments. I think some insensitivity from some of the boards and commissions, and some training or caution about use of language that could be taken the wrong way is a worthwhile thing. So I was supportive of that.
I guess how would you enforce that though? Like, we had somebody in our legal office making offensive comments, and I didn't agree with that, but yet there was nothing as far as any type of punishment, or they couldn't be let go for those comments. So I mean, I guess I'm just kind of confused by the enforcement and what does this mean and how this doesn't align with like some of our human resources practices and policies. That's my concern. And like, who wrote this? Like,
It's been drafted. I think everybody's had a chance to look at this over, the last few months.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
And I do think in this bullet, when it's talking about the code of conduct, that's actually in your rules of procedure. It's an exhibit for the council code of conduct. So I think that's what this piece is referencing, is that for council. And just to just remind, I guess, the community to, yes, as Councilor Belcott mentioned, we do have HR policy that has expectations from employees and defines what that means and the parameters around that.
so I guess I'm interested, how would you enforce this? I mean, there's just, I feel like this is going to complicate things, and what does that enforcement look like? And I don't know, to me, it just doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the language because it's something completely different. It's like, how are we going to dictate conduct? What are the perimeters around that look like? And then also making sure to ensure the county boards and commissions reflect the community they serve. What is that about? And like, how are we going to do that?
Go ahead.
Chair.
The county manager had a comment, and then Councilor Young, I'll turn to you.
And Michelle, you might want to pull up the rules of procedure because there is a section in there as well with regards to violation of the code of professional conduct for council. It is limited, as you know, you can't, discipline each other, but there could be like a public admonishment. But there is some parameters around that in the code of conduct. So.
Okay, Councilor Young.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, this is a resolution. This is not passing any ordinance or laws or anything that are enforceable. This is about the intent of our council, the intent of the county, and our way of expressing to all the people in the community that these are our values. And as we fill the seats in our boards and commissions, that is what we search for. So it's not about removing people or anything like that. It's about expressing our intent that we have civil conversations, that we're respectable and understanding of each other's perspectives and views. And that we have, and when I look at this particular bullet point, I look at saying that our boards and commissions need to be reflective of the community that we have. And that relates to everything. That relates to race, to skin color, to levels of education, to, class, or, what income amounts, everything, different political beliefs. So to me, this is not about punishing people. This is about letting people know of the intent and the values of the council.
That's how what you just said at the end, Councilor Young, is how I was interpreting it. Looks like it's punishing. That's how
Okay.
I'm interpreting that, just that particular bullet.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Fuentes.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree with what Councilor Young is reading into this particular bullet point, because what I'm reading is that we are held accountable as a council to the county's code of conduct. And that the Clark County boards and commissions are also held accountable to the county's code of conduct. I don't see any indication here about removing or punishing anybody. And as far as boards and commissions reflecting community, I think that's an effort that this county council can do to ensure that everybody's represented regardless of their background. I don't see an issue with this particular bullet point at all. I think it's fairly clear to me. So I support this.
Okay, well, it takes, Councilor Little, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think unity is important. I also am experiencing some resolution fatigue, burnout. I printed out our last two resolutions. So this is our third resolution on generally the same topic on political violence, immigration enforcement activity, and unity. And I was kind of comparing them. And there's a lot of whereases where we say generally the same thing. There are some new things in here that could be useful. But there's a lot of repeats. So I guess I would suggest if we can do this efficiently now, either eliminate the whereases where we've already done a resolution on the whereas in the last two, or change that whereas to be the same statement that we said about that topic in the last one, just so we don't spend a whole lot of time going through wordsmithing here. I'd give this back to the folks who initiated this to try to create this, and maybe Jordan, you could help, but it would be great to eliminate some of the redundancy here, which there's a lot, and just focus on the new stuff, if that's possible.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate that thought, and I do agree with you, but if you take those elements away from this resolution, it's not a full resolution. So to me, it's either we pass this resolution with the content that's there, or we rehash an old one and make additions to it. And to me, that is definitely not the most efficient way. But to kind of gut information out of this, somebody would look at it and be kind of like, well, what the heck, what the heck is the meaning behind this? It just wouldn't make sense with removing content from it.
Okay, Councilor Fuentes.
I just wanted to add that in addition, this is a community effort of a few community members and organizations that put time and effort into writing this resolution. And this started back in November, I think. I don't believe this was something that just started a couple of weeks ago. Community members put a lot of time and effort into this. And so I support in keeping it as it is, even though there is some redundancy. I agree with you. But it is a full resolution to Councilor Young's point, and I support it 100%.
Councilor Belcott.
Who were the community members that were involved with this?
Let's see, I think it was Southwest Washington Equity Coalition, NAACP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, it takes 3 thumbs up to move this forward. So I'll just ask, are there 3 thumbs up to move this forward as is? My thumbs up. I see 3 thumbs up, so that can move forward. Thank you for the discussion. Now we're coming to 5.2, Auditor's Office Presentation, 4th Quarter Report. Switching gears a little bit. Welcome.
Is that working?
By now, I think you should be able to figure that out.
Thankfully,
And you have.
I don't get up here that often. So first one, welcome April back to the county. Nice to see you back here. And take a moment of personal privilege and express my appreciation to Councilor Chair Marshall for her service. And you will be missed. So.
Thank you very much. I still have 10 months though, and I intend to make the most of it.
Well, I think I can speak for both of us. They'll go pretty fast. But, so yeah, we're here to provide the first quarterly financial update for 2026. Looking back, we have some good news and some news that's maybe not quite as good. Really want to bring your attention to really just focus in on kind of the operating condition of the general fund. And when I talk about the operating condition, when I look at the general fund's total revenues and expenses, net of transfers to other funds, net of capital expenditures. So it really gets to the operations. The good news is that instead of the operating loss that was budgeted for 2025 of $31 million, the operating loss, now here's the bad news, the operating loss was $1.3 million. That is the first time the general fund has had an operating loss in the history of as far back as we can look. So it's not a good trend, and it's something that I think deserves a lot of attention and work. The projected operating loss for 2026 is $16.5 million. However, again, the loss we actually incurred in 2025 was significantly less than the loss that was budgeted, that was projected for 25. And so with that, I will hand it over to the experts that can fill in all the appropriate information around that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start by reviewing Mitchell Kelly, Reporting and Analysis Manager in the Auditor's Office Financial Services. I'll start by going over the comparison that we have to a prior year for the revenues for general fund. We've separated it into 3 separate buckets: property tax, sales and use tax, and then other revenue. In total, the revenue associated with property tax has had a small increase of about 2%. Our sales tax increased just over 1%, 1.37%, which is lower than what we generally see. And then our other revenue was pretty stable. As requested by council, we did include a comparison to the inflation rate for that same period from 24 to 25. The inflation rate was 2.7% according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Our revenue growth was 1.25%. So that is an important factor to consider where we ended up at the end of the year. These numbers are draft. We're still in the process of closing our books, but it's fairly certain of where we're going to land, very, very close to where we're going to land. Are there any questions about the revenue and the comparisons?
Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to thank you for getting the inflation data on here. And I think this sheet, if people in the public are paying attention, can really illustrate the difficulties and the challenge that we have in Clark County with the system of revenue that we have. You know, the growth rate of our general fund was 1.25%. And at the same time, inflation was 2.7%. So you can see right there that our funding is not increasing enough to even cover inflation. And this does not include the fact that there are more people in the county that have either moved or been born into it that the county has to provide services for. And then I think that I know you haven't gotten there yet, but I'll just save this comment since it's in line with this, and then you can move forward. But looking down below that at the expense growth, you know, the 2.85% is how much the growth rate has been, and inflation is 2.7. Those numbers are right on top of each other. So our funding is increasing, our expenses are increasing right in line with inflation, and our funding is not expanding anywhere close to it. So just illustrates an important point that I think the public should be aware of. And what happens in the long term when we continually see these kinds of numbers, it leads to real problems. So thank you.
Thanks for underlining that, Councillor Young.
Yes, and I was going to be talking about that, and we can actually move down to the expense side. Here we've compared what our budgeted expenses were and what our actual expenses were. As Greg mentioned, our budgeted expenses, our actual expenses were less than our budgeted expenses. And so we have some savings that we had realized within our salaries. A small percentage of our benefits were budget remaining at the end of the year, but then also our services and services, supplies, and other charges and transfers. Those are some of the areas where we had some savings in expense compared to budget. And as Councillor Young mentioned, down below, you can see the growth rate related to our expenses from 24 to 25 was 2.85%. And then comparing to the inflation rate, that was 2.7%. So looking at the growth rate compared to the revenue that we experienced and comparing that to the expense, you can see that there's about 1.5 percentage variance between our revenue growth and our expense growth. And that contributed to where we ended up with a negative overall unbalance or negative situation in our in our activity for the year.
Excuse me, Mark Gasway, County Finance Director. I wonder if you could just zoom out just a little bit so we can see both of these graphs together. A lot of time is spent in our financial reports and in the creation of the budget in talking about what we call a structural deficit. And we've revised this particular quarterly report so that you have a better indication of what that structural deficit looks like. As Mitchell mentioned, you can see the growth rate in revenues at 1.25%. And now on the same page, you'll be able to see the growth in expenses. And you can see that the growth in our expense rate is 2.85%. That by definition is what our structural deficit is. So our revenues are not growing at the same rate or slower than our expenses. And so when we talk about different types of deficits, structural deficit is this. And each quarter we'll be able to show you, as we've revised this report, right on the face of the report, what that looks like. So the next point that I wanted to talk about is what we consider our operating deficit. One of the things that we've revised in this report is we've tried to strip down the expenses and the revenues to what operations are. So we've pulled out things like capital or one-time transfers so that we can look at what's our operating revenues versus our operating expenses. And if you look at the top graph of revenue, you can see in 2024, we had about 211 million in operating revenues. Do you see that number? 210,957. And if you go down below to the expenses in 2024, it was 208,932. So at the end of the year, this is 12 months, we had about a $2 million surplus in our operating activities. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, if you look at 2025, as Greg mentioned, our operating revenues are 213,588. And if you go down to our expenses, they're 214,895. So for the first time, we actually have an operating deficit. So when we talk about an operating deficit, this is what we're referring to. We have less revenue than we had expenses in 2025 for the first time ever. And it's about $1.3 million. And we've talked about this, I believe, since the end of last year. We've said that it's likely in 2025 we will have an operating deficit. So as we all know, an operating deficit, we have some things to help with that. We have fund balance and some other things that we can use to offset that. But a continued operating deficit would put us in a position of what we call a fund deficit. Our general fund is not in a fund deficit position right now. In fact, at the end of 2025, we'll have about $90 million in our fund balance. Of that $90 million, there's certain amounts that we reserve based on our fund balance policy and based on accounting rules that we have to set aside. But even after that set aside, we'll have about $48 million in what's called unassigned fund balance. That $48 million is what is available to be used for one-time things. For example, offsetting the current budget. In the 2026 budget, we have about $16 million in budgeted operating deficit. And we will come back to you later in the spring when we have that number finalized and ask you to assign an amount to cover that budgeted operating deficit. That's something we do every year. but we want to make sure that we have enough funding to cover anything that's been budgeted. And that's what that one-time fund balance, that unassigned fund balance would be used for. So again, as we go through the definition of these, and it can be confusing, but we're trying to make it more plain here, what a structural deficit is, what an operating deficit is, and what a fund deficit is. And so we'll continue to use those three terms in talking about how our general fund operations are functioning. Okay?
Can I ask
Any
a-
questions on that?
Yes,
Can I ask a
go ahead.
clarifying question? On the savings, that most of that I think is on salary, but it does incorporate, or does it incorporate unspent capital that would actually be moving forward to this year? So therefore it's not a true savings on that. Is that included in that amount?
So we've excluded any of the capital from this page.
Okay.
From this page. In fact, let's go to the second page, because we've added a second page. Not this one.
First, in Mitchell's sheet where it showed the 28.5% reduction in transfers.
The graphs
graphs
do
do.
include that,
Yeah, not this one. this
but we'll
The-
show more
The graphs
detail.
include the savings from capital that wasn't
The
completed.
full budgeted amount.
Okay,
yeah.
so some of that savings is already committed.
Right.
That will be moving it forward. So it's not a true savings where now the money's available for other.
Right, and I'll explain that in this graph. So this is a page we've added for the general fund. We're primarily focused right now on the general fund, and we'll spend a few minutes talking about some of the other funds in a minute, but we're focused on the general fund. This schedule will show you the budgeted 2025 budgeted amounts and actual amounts for revenues and expenses. And so as you go down the list, there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out on this. And I'm kind of looking at the comment section now. If you look at property tax, we did a very good job of budgeting our property taxes, less than 1% difference on $82 million, which is very close. If we look at our sales tax, we were quite a bit under. We knew that going through the year, we could see that was happening. So we traditionally budgeted at a historical rate of 4.2% growth. We only came in at 1.37. And because of that, we made some decisions in this year's budget to drop that to 2%. If you recall, during the budget conversations, we dropped the sales tax growth, the county budget office, we dropped it to 2% because we saw it coming in lower. So far this year, we've actually had some good returns. Our November sales, our October sales that we got in December actually came in at 2.1%. And our November sales that came in January came in at 3% growth. So they're improving. But again, I see that it was very prudent to drop that growth in 2026 because I think it's a much more realistic view of what we'll have for 2026. And then going down the list, there's a couple other things in here real quickly. You can see our grant revenues were down about 5 million. A lot of times there are grants that we just don't spend on. And if we don't spend the money, a lot of these are reimbursable grants. So if we don't spend it, and you'll see down below in some of the expense lines, there's some savings there. And it's likely because we didn't spend the money and we didn't collect the revenue. So they offset. In the future, we're hoping to break out the impact of grants separately, like in a separate column, so you can see our operations without grants and our operations with grants, because they're really two different things. So,
Could we pause for some questions? I think
sure.
We're getting pent up here. Go ahead, Councilor Fuentes.
Thank you, Mark, or anybody can answer this question. But, I know we talked a little bit about this when we were going over the budget back in late 2025. But the sales tax growth for 2025 was 1.37, which is well below, according to this, the historical 4.2%. Can you remind us and community members what caused the significant difference between those two?
Sure. The major sector in the county that contributed to the reduction in the sales tax growth was our construction sector. As I think most people are aware, our construction was down quite a bit last year. Typically, that sector will provide 30 to 35% of the sales tax in our county. and it was below that 30%. So that's the primary cause of why we were below what our historical, in fact, that 4.2% is like a 20-year trend, including some, recessionary years and other things. So it's usually a pretty solid estimate. But as you can see, we were below that this last year. So.
And let me ask you a follow-up question. I don't think it's a secret that a lot of Washingtonians along the Oregon, Washington state borders will travel across the river to make high value purchases to avoid paying taxes. Have you seen an increase in that? I don't know if you have the data, but have you seen an increase in that as inflation has gone up, the cost of living in general has gone up, right? And the cost of everything has gone up. Do we expect, I think it's called tax leakage, if I remember correctly, do we expect that to continue to increase, or are you seeing any trends that are the opposite of that?
Yeah, actually, Counselor, that's an interesting point, because about 2020, when during the COVID years, we actually saw that trend reversing quite a bit. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, shortly prior to that, they passed the Wayfair Act, which is the Sales Tax Fairness Act, and it required people to pay sales tax at the delivery point. So it's a delivery point sales tax. So customers like Amazon or people that would do online shopping, they were now paying sales tax where it was delivered rather than where it was shipped from. We saw a huge change in how we were receiving our sales tax at that point, where, 10 years ago, Amazon wasn't in the top 10 of our sales tax providers. Now they're in the top 5. So that has helped reduce that sales tax leakage quite a bit, because a lot of people have shifted to online shopping. And then I think the most recent analysis I did, and I'm kind of looking at Kathleen, it showed a decrease, but I don't remember exactly what the decrease was. It was several millions, maybe up as high as 10 million 10 years ago, where it had dropped to half or something like that. So the trend was going the right direction, but it'll never completely go away. So,
Mark?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, are you collecting regular data on the tax leakage so that we can pass that along to our legislative members?
The way tax leakage is calculated is we base it on the average sales tax generated per capita. So we can look at the rest of the state that are not border counties and see how much sales tax that they're paying per capita. And we apply that to what we receive and calculate a difference. So we don't know how much we're losing per transaction, but we know how much we're losing per capita. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that's good. I mean, anything helps, just so that we can convey through our lobbyist to our legislature that this is an important issue and they have the latest data possible.
And I can update that. So
I also think that the reimbursable grants, showing that on a separate line is really important, because as you said, it's not necessarily that money won't be coming in, it's a timing issue.
Sure.
So it looks different than the other kinds of numbers, I assume.
And that's something that we've talked about doing in our first quarter of 2026, where we're showing that as a separate line item or separate column. So just to finish out this schedule real quickly, let's drop down to the expense. As was mentioned previously, there was some expense savings. You can see in our salary and benefit line that there's $7.2 million in unspent budget for our salaries. Of that, it's $6.3 million in salaries and just under $1 million in benefits. We broke that down separately. So our benefits, again, we're very closely budgeted, whereas our salaries we're fully budgeted. So I want to remind council, we fully budget salaries, because if we have a position, an FTE that we can hire into, we have to have the budget capacity to do that. Because of these vacancies, we naturally have this built-in salary savings each year, and that will continue. We'll always have that because we're never fully staffed.
That would be another to watch over time, how that goes up or down. Because if we have a huge number of unfilled vacancies, well, then that's problematic itself.
Yeah. I I just put a note on the liability insurance. I think this was mentioned in actually one of our budget hearings. Our liability insurance itself was right on budget. But the point what I wanted to point out is it actually increased $281,000 from the prior year. And that's a big increase. I mean, 12.7% increase, but dollar-wise, almost $500,000 increase in our liability insurance. And then continuing down, we had some savings in our supplies, our services, and our contingency line. The contingency is usually set aside in case we need it within a department or for either settlements or wage settlements or things like that. We didn't need to move about $3.4 million up into the salary line. And then to the point I believe that Kathleen was asking about, we moved below this line, this what I consider operations, these transfers. We have one-time transfers that were in the budget, and we tried to move those out so it doesn't dilute the net operating expenses. And you can see we had one fairly large transfer that we moved out, and that was related to commitments that were made when we had our ARPA grant that we're still paying out. I don't want to confuse those with the normal operations within the general fund. So that 19.7 million is still available. We've just taken it and moved it to a separate fund where we can administer those expenses separately until those projects are completed. And then as Kathleen mentioned, there were transfers budgeted in 2025 for capital type projects, and those weren't spent in 2025, but those have been rolled forward into the 2026 budget. So if you look at the 2026 budget, it has the 13.46 million that was rolled forward. So it could be, the capacity could be preserved for projects in 2026. And that's what that second to the bottom line is. And then overall, you can see in that middle column in our actual, the operating deficit of 1.3 million. Again, this is preliminary numbers. There'll be a few refinements, but it'll primarily land right about that $1.3 million. So I'll pause again if you have any questions at this point.
Okay, Councillor Belcott.
Thanks, Chair. I don't see anything on here, or maybe I missed it, about eliminating FTEs or how we can reduce staff. Just last week, I sent the council WASIX, which is Washington Association of Counties Fiscal Health Survey, and it showed 16 other counties within Washington state are starting to do that and looking at eliminating and trying to figure out cost savings as far as staffing goes. And I know that you mentioned, Mark, those empty FTEs that we've talked about several different times. So are we looking at that as well?
That would come up in like our budget discussions rather than a financial reporting discussion. So that is a topic that could be that the council would like to talk about. I would suggest when we start our budget discussions in a few months that come up, because this,
all right,
this is kind of reporting the past. I'm sorry, but this is historical versus planning for the future. So
all right, sounds good.
And
Thank you.
And this is general fund only that you're seeing here. And just as a kind reminder to council, 75% of our general fund is the law and justice system.
Right.
So that we would, and I see this on here, but there, we got the additional revenue due to the 6211 billing. So actually getting cost recovery for like the district court services for the city. So that's incorporated. If I could just also note on the transfers, on the operating side, because there is transfers on the operating, that would be like going to wetland and habitat or other service parks where we're having to transfer from general fund to other funds because they're not balanced as well. So there is some operational transfers that happen during the year.
And that's also been one of the discussions we had. How can we better show that? And we have what we consider managed transfers each year. And Kathleen mentioned a couple of those, the parks, public health, community services, elections fund, all those are transfers that are coming out of the general fund that we manage, that we have programmed in. And so we're thinking about, again, next month as we show, grants separately, maybe showing this managed transfer line separate as well, so that you can understand, well, what is it that's in those transfers? So we're trying to be as explanatory as we can.
And you're doing a very good job.
So
Counselor Young.
Yes, I think, Mark, that you accidentally misspoke when you were talking about the insurance liability policy. I think you said 281,000. I wanted to point out that it's 400. Yeah, 481,000. And if I remember correctly, the 1% that year meant around 530,000. So the 1% barely covered our liability insurance increase that year. That's it. I mean, in almost the entirety of the 1% covered just the liability insurance policy increase.
Yeah. And again, thank you, Kathleen, for pointing out that we did indicate on there in one of the comments, I just kind of skipped past it, the additional revenue that came in from the 6211 and the jail bed day billings. That's in the internal charges line. So I noted it, but I didn't mention it. So, all right. That's all I have for now, and Mitchell's going to continue with the backside of that report.
So if you could go back to the first. Perfect. Okay. And so then we return to this first sheet. We're going to talk about just a few of the funds that have a high activity. First of all, the road fund was close to spending their anticipated budget, and some of the remaining revenue collected is also related to grants that the expenses relate to not being spent. So we didn't collect the money just yet. It's likely that we will collect that in the future, but we will need to have the expenses to cover that revenue. If we move further down, talking about some of the transfers that we talked about, where we transfer money to community development to cover for permits, that has been reduced. So in the prior year, in 24, we transferred $1.5 million from general fund to Fund 1011, the permitting fund. That reduced by about $500,000 because of council's decision to change the rates so we can more fully collect for these different permit fees that the community engages in. So that's a great trend. That was the first year. Last year was the first year where those rates were adjusted. So we would anticipate that there's going to be an improvement every year. We would anticipate the general fund would need to support this fund in some capacity, but to have it reduce is a great improvement to what has been happening in the past. And then the final fund that we just are displaying here is the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. Total expenses were close to the total budgeted expenses that we had. Our revenues were pretty close. We do anticipate some of the sales tax related to this being collected in the coming months, in coming days, actually, so that we would accrue back to the prior year. So we will probably land within that 3.66% budget remaining. It will probably shrink to be more on par with what our estimated budgeted revenue was. Are there any questions about all these three other funds that we talked about?
Any questions? I think we're good.
Then we have just one last one last report that we want to show you. So this is our monthly financial report for December. I believe council receives this every month or has access to it every month. And I just wanted to go through, if you go back up to the top, just a little bit. Yeah, thank you. So what this does, it focuses on our general fund each month. So you can look at where we're at on a monthly basis. This one happens to be for the month of January. Could you go up just a
This
little?
is December.
December, sorry. This is the month of December. So if you look at the month over month sales tax in that very first line, you can see the 2.1% increase. That 2.1% was actually October retail sales. So we have a 2-month lag, but you can see that that's the month I was referring to. And then if you look at the December sheet, you would see a 3% increase. So that's where you can see those trends. The rest of this is really just kind of a detail. One thing I want to point out, if you look at the overtime for the year over year, you can see we're down almost 3%, which is something we've been trying to get to, is having better control over the overtime. And then if you could go down for that bottom group. So these are some of our major funds. And the reason why we show these with other than the general fund or the road fund with cash balances, because a lot of these funds, the cash balance is what's the most salient piece of that fund. So you can see in our mental health sales tax fund at the end of the year, we're projecting about $11.4 million, which is down from 18.8, which is planned. We had planned to spend down that fund. You can see our REIT funds are pretty stable. Even though we did a financing last year and are spending a little bit more out of our REIT 1 to help pay for the financing that we did, it's still a very stable position right now. And then the Community Development Fund, again, we talked about how we've seen some decreases in development activity, but the fund is only down about $1 million for the year. The fund balance policy in that particular fund requires us to keep about a year's worth of expenses on hand in the case of a downturn so that we can continue to provide services for those permits that have been issued. And so you can see that we have a fairly healthy balance to take care of that, hoping that, you know, our activity picks back up again in the near future. But we have planned for these things, and the fund balance policies help us keep on track to be able to service to provide the services that we've committed to as a county. So, and any questions on this? You can have access to this every month. If you have questions, you're welcome to call either myself or Mitchell. We only usually present it maybe once with our quarterly report so that you can kind of see an update of what it looks like. So,
Councilor Young.
Yeah, I had a question about the community development again. Now, if the revenue's down over $1 million, I don't know. I mean, our expenses wouldn't, I mean, primarily those expenses are staff related. And so our expenses have not dropped by that same amount. Am I correct in that thinking?
yeah, this is actually a cash balance. So your cash balance is down about $1 million,
Okay.
which would be
I
the
missed
net
that part.
impact of revenue and expenses. So
Okay.
we've already ran through the expenses for the year and the revenues for the year, and we ended up using $1 million in cash to offset that.
Okay. And then, so how does that look? I mean, is that bringing us close to our minimum reserve policy, or do we still have a little bit of room in there before we get
Yeah.
there?
Let me do a little bit more detail on that for you rather than just speak to it at this point, and I'll send that out to you, what actually makes up that fund balance policy and what the fund balance is actually at. We'll be closing out the whole year real soon. I mean, we're closing everything out now, and then we'll have a final number for you. We'll come back once we have the full annual financial report in about June, once it's been audited, and present that to you as well. So you'll have a
Great,
chance
thank
to
you.
look at that. But I'll get you in the next week or so a detail on that particular fund.
And if I can note, I think this was shared during the budget hearing too, that the Community Development Fund is in a structural deficit, and staff is working with ComDev on how that could look, including looking at those fees annually that come before council.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, I'm actually going to look at April. If construction is reducing, I do believe that there's a couple vacancies as well, because if we're not having to do inspections that have been held in ComDev, that can also help offset the reduction.
Yeah. That was
extent of fixing the structural deficit,
Yeah,
but
that was
that's how we do it.
a practice that the council kind of took on last year. We had kind of a big adjustment because the fees for community development had not been adjusted for a long time. And now if we look at them annually, like we do with some of our other funds, you'll have, much smaller adjustments, but you can respond much more quickly to economic conditions. So I think that that's good.
Councilor Marshall.
Yes, please go ahead.
And only part of community development has done that work. There's still half of it that needs to be looked at, and the research needs to be done and brought to council.
Good. I agree that it's a good thing.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just wanted to say I'm sitting here in virtual land and I have not seen April yet, but I just heard her voice, and what a pleasure it is to hear it.
I wish we could swing the camera around, but
Wait, she has one.
There we go. Thank you. Any other questions? More to present?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. This is all very good information. Will inform us as we're going into our budgeting process. So appreciate your work. Okay, 5.3 letter of support, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Local Data for Equitable Communities Grant. Jordan.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon again, Council. For the record, Jordan Bogey, Policy Analyst. Sharing this letter came to Council from Public Health, and this is kind of directly coming out of the resolution that Council passed, where there was a direction for Clark County Public Health to work with community partners to identify potential health impacts of immigration enforcement and to present that back to the County Council as the County Board of Health. And so Public Health is looking to partner with Latino Leadership Northwest, and Latino Leadership Northwest is trying to get a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to support some work to do research and gather information from immigrant families about their experiences, accessing services and programs in Clark County, and then working with Latino Leadership Northwest to identify some potential community-driven solutions to some of the issues that the data raises. Anecdotally, as Council will recall, we've been hearing that folks are reluctant to access services, are less likely to go out in public if they're fearful, and that includes medical and health-related services. And so that's how Public Health is getting involved in this. And so the desire from this project would be to get some hard data on that, right? To collect some information about exactly what the scope of the issue is and put some numbers behind what we're hearing from some community members. And so they have requested a letter of support for this grant from the County Council as the County Board of Health. And so present this letter to Council for your consideration to see if you would like to support this request. It's a little bit time sensitive. I believe their application is due on Monday. And so if Council's supportive, we'll get that to them in the next day or so they can include that in the application packet.
Great. Councilor Young.
Yes, I just had a question. Are there any other organizations that are applying from the same or for the same grant funding? And I'm just wanting to know if we're issuing a letter of support for their application, or is any other organization being excluded?
That is a good question. I am not aware of any other organizations who are applying for this funding that might also want to request a letter. I have not heard. This kind of came from us directly from Public Health. So there may be, but I am not aware.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to support this, but I would have concerns with that if there are other organizations, because I've not had the opportunity to compare in any way.
Right. Good question. I don't know that we can get the answer to that in time for their grant application. Councilor Belcott.
I'd be interested in that information as well.
I'm happy to, after this, I can follow up with Public Health and see if they know of any other organizations in the community that are trying to access any funding in this round from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
what I would suggest in terms of, I know there's timeliness issued here. I would issue my approval of this, hinging on that there are no other organizations locally that have applied for that funding. If there are, then I would be hesitant to support it without being able to evaluate the different applicants.
I'm not sure we could definitively have that answer. I don't know that we'll be able to know if there's other groups out there that, I mean, we can inquire of public health and see what they know. And would this apply just to the data collection, just to Clark County?
That is my understanding. Yes, that that this would be specifically in Clark County for this data research.
Other questions or comments?
I just, well, first of all, I do support us supporting Latino Leadership Northwest and Public Health with this letter for this grant. They have taken the initiative to come in front of council and ask for this support. In addition, I'm very familiar with the work that they do, and I think that they are the right organization in Southwest Washington to do this work. So I support it 100%.
I'd support it as well.
Great. I would support it as well. And I think if there are any organization out there with wanting to collaborate with the health department on this kind of a project, I think they would have expressed that by now. So for the CAL, we have 3. So we'll move forward with this. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, moving on to councilor reports. Are there any reports from councilors on the boards and commissions we serve on? I'm not here. Okay, Councilor Young, you squeaked in there. Go ahead. Oh, and then Councilor Belkite. Go ahead, Councilor Young.
Yes, I would like to report on Tuesday, our Clark County Accessible Community Advisory Committee met and had some discussion, and some of that discussion was centered around having the opportunity to be involved in informing our staff when it comes to projects that accessibility affects or is a part of that project. And I just would like to advocate for moving forward with the process, a very direct, written down process that ensures that all of our departments are looking at all of the different boards and commissions that they should be checking in with on any plans, starting at the very, very beginning. I wouldn't say at the very, very beginning, but so that they're involved from, the start of the project until the finish. And Jordan, I'd ask you if my recollection was correct. I know I had mentioned that I'd planned to discuss some things, but am I missing anything? Do you remember?
I think that was the biggest piece. Let me take a look. I didn't have anything else written down in my notes, but yes, I know that was something. Specifically, I can just add a little more context to this conversation too, is around the Lucky dog park, and there was a recent the trail there was recently mulched over with bark, which for folks that are able to walk, it's a nice soft surface, but if you're in a wheelchair, it's difficult to navigate. And we had talked a little bit with Ross and some of our parks folks about that when it was raised by one of our members of the committee. And gravel is much more expensive to do, and so there's need for kind of over the longer term, right, when we're looking at like 6-year plans and things like that, to think about accessibility at the beginning so that we can understand, what the costs might be, the true costs of some of these upgrades when we're also trying to be accessible, because in the short term, there may or may not be funding to support, accessibility upgrades that would be really helpful for all members of the community. So I think that's kind of where that came from. Thank you.
And you reminded me of kind of the second half of the request that I plan to have. And this would be a request at this point to see if there's a second counselor that would entertain putting in this on the agenda in the future. But, when it comes to funding priorities, you know, when you look at a project where, okay, we put bark chips in instead of gravel that would have been better for accessibility purposes, there are policy level decisions that are made. You know, we have certain budget restraints and we have to stay within that. And so, you know, evaluating, hey, do we spend the money on this gravel? And if we do, what from the project are we looking at cutting? Those kind of policy level decisions, I would like to have a discussion that would center around accessibility and the level of priority that we give it, and just have something more, you know, a more documented process on how we approach accessibility in all of the things that we do in the county.
So Councillor Young, are you suggesting to bring this back for a discussion at a council time meeting?
Yes, but at this point, it would be just bringing it to the agenda so that we can make
Exactly.
that decision. Yes.
Great. Okay. I would be supportive of that, but I think it'll be important to perhaps narrow things, because looking at all departments and any plans is pretty broad and far reaching, and could be just cumbersome in itself. And I think there could be certain departments where that interface with accessibility, like parks, would be more frequent than other departments. So I think there's some finessing, but if it comes to an agenda for us to discuss further, we can do that.
Yeah, and I
So we
agree. And I think part of the ultimate discussion would be just that, you know, to what, you know, how do we get all the departments? Some are going to be obviously spending more time in front of the committee than others, but how do they look at their workload and evaluate what is appropriate to bring to the committee and what is not necessarily? But I think that has to be a deliberately thought through process. Otherwise it gets missed.
Other counselors? Go ahead, Counselor Little.
I generally support the idea. I just think it needs some thought on exactly what we're asking for. I just want to make sure that we're talking about policy, council level policy decisions, and we don't want to interfere with a local staff decision on whether to put gravel or wood chips somewhere. I don't want to get in that kind of detail.
Right, and I agree, but the relative part where I do believe that it is policy is one item leads to accessibility and the other does not. And so the priority is, what level of priority do we place on accessibility, and to what degree do we ask staff to accommodate individuals with disabilities? So I do believe that I agree with you. I don't want to get into the weeds. That's not our lane for sure. But in terms of overarching policy and focus on accessibility, I do believe it is within our purview.
Okay, it's worthy of putting on the agenda and having that discussion, and we don't need to fully have that discussion right now. Okay, I think there's 3 thumbs up on the dais. Counselor Young, okay, all around support for that idea. Other boards and commission reports?
I just wanted to mention really quick, Josh recaps everything that's in the legislative WASC meeting. So I'm not going to go over what he's already discussed, because he is working everything on Mondays and also through Jordan. But I am having another WASC meeting on Friday. I think they're just going to go over again what you will hear on Monday, which is the bills that are dying.
Okay, it's that kind of a session. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to work session. Oh, let's see. Yeah, work session request.
Yes, the one before you today is regarding the Fairgrounds capital project financing. I believe that council got an update last year on the Fairgrounds master plan. So this request is to have the finance team, facilities, as well as leadership from our event center to come talk about the treasurer's office looking at completing a finance package for 2026 to help complete the several projects that were proposed in that. So there's, in order for them, they need a lot of lead time to actually do the work to look at financing options and want to get that direction from council before they put in that time and effort.
Great, sounds good. Thumbs up here. Others? I know the parking lot is getting worked on right now. at the fairgrounds. So that's good. Okay, policy updates. Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few legislative updates for you today. So first of all, today is the policy committee in the opposite chamber cutoff. So for bills that made it through either the House or the Senate, today is the deadline for them to make it out of the opposite chamber policy committee. If they don't do that, then they will not be moving forward, unless, of course, they're deemed necessary to implement the budget. And on the topic of FPHS funding, on the Foundational Public Health Services funding, which Council did adopt that resolution as Board of Health this morning. That funding for that looks to be moving forward. And I know the Association of Local Public Health Officials, WSALFO, as well as the overall Association of Counties is mobilizing, and the Council's resolution has been shared with folks as part of that effort. It's kind of been a statewide effort on behalf of counties to try to get that funding back. So I know I want to pass along their appreciation. I know they've expressed that a few times in some of the larger meetings. And then I just want to give a quick update on the budget drafts. I know Josh is going to be talking about these a little bit more on Monday, but I had a chance to go and check out the capital and transportation budgets, which were not out as of Monday morning when we had our last legislative discussion. And just wanted to note that both chambers' capital budgets do include some funding for improvements at the Madrona Behavioral Health Facility, which I know Council has been engaged in some of those discussions. So it's great that that is in both versions of the budget. The other thing that is in both versions of the capital budget is funding for Evergreen Habitat for Humanity to purchase the Hidden Valley Mobile Home Park that Council recently wrote a letter in support of. And so that is good news. And assuming that that moves forward, which seems likely since it's in both budgets, I did get some outreach from Evergreen Habitat, and they would like to invite Council to come take a look at the mobile home park and learn about what Habitat is planning once that sale goes through, assuming that all that funding does go through from the legislature. And in less good news, we did not receive any further capital funding for the jail. There's not further funding in this supplemental budget. We did, as a reminder, get a little over 1.5 million in the last budget. So that's great, and we'll take another swing at it next session. And then I sent some information to Council as well, but I just wanted to highlight in the transportation budget, there's funding for several CTRAN projects. There is some funding for the Camas Slough Bridge, which if you've been over that on the east side of the county, you know that's in bad shape, so that is good. There's some funding in Clark County for railroad track and bridge improvements on the county-owned railroad. And then there is also some funding in the county for SR 502 Main Street widening project in Battleground from the state. So there is some transportation funding flowing into the county for various projects. And we will continue to monitor that as the budgets get finalized and we figure out which of the two chambers budget bills will be the vehicle. We'll be tracking that. And I know Josh is working on that as well, but just wanted to give that heads up to Council in addition to what we talked about on Monday with Vancouver Lake and the $50,000 that is in the Senate version of that for the county.
Say, Jordan, on the transportation budget, is there still funding for 179th and I-5 interchanges?
Yes, I believe so. I would need to go back and double check, but I believe that is the case. I was looking at a list of some of the newly funded projects, but I believe that's still in there, but I'll double check that and confirm with Council.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Young?
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask that question as well. Glad to hear that it's still there. But I'm wondering if we have ever taken a look at the dollars that are coming back to Clark County and seeing whether we're getting our fair share or not. I don't know who would be in charge of doing that, but I'd be curious to see. I mean, are the tax dollars that are leaving the county, are they coming back to the county, or are they staying in King County, or what is happening? I appreciate all the work that our local delegation does to keep those dollars here local, but I would like to somehow have an idea of whether we're getting our fair share or not.
That's a good question. RTC might be an entity to inquire about that.
I don't know if Jordan, maybe you could.
Yeah, I
Sure,
can
look
dig
into
into that a little bit. Yeah, we can, like, RTC probably would be good. We can talk a little bit with our finance folks, maybe able to help provide some data, State Office of Financial Management. And I mean, we may be able to do just kind of a back of the napkin, you know, how much funding is coming into the county versus, you know, how much we're paying in taxes generally to the state, to get kind of a ballpark as well. So yeah, I can dig into that and see what I can find for you guys.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And Councillor Young, you're looking at all of the projects that come into the county, not just the ones that the county is responsible for.
Well,
Like
yeah,
each of the
I mean,
cities.
generally, I'm not an expert in transportation, so I think that I would leave that to Jordan to decide whether we should look at the entirety of it, or I'm not sure exactly. That's a good question.
Okay, because I think over all of the projects and projects that go to CTRAN, they're all serving our greater county population. So, and I think the tax dollars that go in are from the broader community as well. So I think that would give us the clearest picture. Okay, we'll leave it to Jordan to figure out. Thumbs up on his account. All right. Anything else, Jordan?
That's all I've got for you today, Council.
Okay, that moves us to 9.1 executive session, potential litigation, RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, paren little I, for 15 minutes with no after action. And so we'll convene in executive session and return when we're completed.
That will be about 2:45 if that's
yep,
okay.
2:45.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
The Clark County Council has asked us to announce that executive session will be extended for an additional 10 minutes and open session will reconvene at 2:55. Thank you. Good afternoon. The council chair has asked us to announce that executive session will be extended for an additional 10 minutes and open session will reconvene at 3:05. Thank you. The Clark County Council has asked us to announce that executive session will be extended for an additional 5 minutes and open session will reconvene at 3:10. Thank you.
Council has returned from our executive session. There's no after action, and without objection, the meeting is adjourned.